Welcome to the Week in 60 Minutes, brought to you by SpectatorTV, recorded on Thursday, March the 11th. On this week's show, we'll be talking vaccine hesitancy, not from people of colour, but from Poles who live in Britain. We'll also be taking a look at the murky and thrilling world of commodities traders and how they're never far from exploiting a geopolitical crisis. And of course, we'll be discussing that interview. You know the one I mean, so no need to spell it out. All that to come in the next hour. As always, if you subscribe to the Spectator's YouTube channel, why wouldn't you? It's free. You never miss a program. Just click the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen now. A very special thanks to Charles Stanley for their continued support of the Week in 60 Minutes. Charles Stanley is one of the UK's leading wealth management firms, one of the oldest companies on the London Stock Exchange. We're delighted to be partners with them. Now, the clearly publicity-shy minor royals, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, opened up to real royalty this week, Queen Opera of all the Americas and beyond. Only about another 100 million or so around the globe got to watch and listen to, so the couple must have been pleased that their wish for privacy was being respected. Much of the content was absurdly trivial, like tears over a floral dress. But when the interview touched on race and mental health matters, it was incendiary enough to provoke an onslaught on the royal family from around the globe. In this week's Spectator, our deputy editor, Freddie Gray, writes that Harry and Meghan have set up their rival royal house in California, and he joins the show now, together with Spectator columnist Rod Liddle, who muses on the American individualism that explains so much of Meghan Markle. Well, welcome to you both. Freddie, what do you mean by a rival royal family across the pond?
Well, I think Harry and Meghan have established themselves as a house of woke, really. And I mean, I think we tend to overuse the word woke. It's a bit of a sort of catch-all. But it is quite useful in summing up their worldview. And their worldview is very much oriented around celebrity and sort of therapy, really, because if you watch the Oprah interview, it's like a long counselling session. And this is actually very potent in the media because people love talking about their feelings. And I think where Harry and Meghan got this idea from was the Heads Together campaign, which was something the younger royals launched in 2017 when they decided that mental health, they wanted to do a big drive on mental health. And a lot of sort of royal people, royal suck-ups, PR operatives, got very excited about this idea that the younger royals could rebrand the monarchy by talking about their feelings and how much they suffered. But I think other people within the royal family realised this was quite a bad idea and that people don't want to hear royals gassing on about their feelings. And so William and Kate sort of pulled back a bit from that, I think. But Harry and Meghan, it came to them very naturally and they couldn't stop themselves. So they have become this sort of rival house of therapeutic woke culture.
And Rod, you can see that in some of the language that both Meghan Markle and Oprah Winfrey use, because apparently what now matters is that people have their own truth. That what I think is truth, even if it isn't true.
Yes, and I think it lies at the very centre of this problem we have with Meghan and, to a degree, Harry. I mean, Harry matters so much less in a way because the driving force seems to be Meghan. That it's right from the beginning, our antipathy towards the woman, if there was any in the press, and there was, seemed to be not because she was of mixed race. I don't know anyone who objected to the colour of her skin. But because she was an American, and a particular kind of American who cleaves to those values, which some Americans do. And you see that in the narcissism, in the relentless self-examination and self-obsession. And I think it's the consequence, I mean, I suppose it's a pretentious argument, but I think it devolves from America's primacy of the individual over the communitarian, in that you can, if you're an individual, have your own truth. And you can, if you're an individual, have your own concept of duty, which is what she said. And her concept of duty didn't involve doing as she was told and performing a service for a country. It involved scampering off to California, i.e. doing what she likes. It's a very interesting view of the world. And I think a lot of the antipathy does come down to the fact that it really is a culture clash, not a racist culture clash, just that usual culture clash between the US and Britain. And don't forget that individualism we have imported to a huge degree from America. And that individualism is also part of identity politics, which, of course, both Harry and Meghan cleave to. Again, that people can be whatever they wish to be, and that what an individual feels is more important than what actually the truth is. So I think an awful lot of that plays into it.
It is interesting, Rod, though, the way the whole interview was framed, and particularly what Meghan Markle was saying with Harry, basically just having a walk-on part. It's very much the way a lot of woke dialogue goes there. So if I feel I've been victimized, I am victimized. Just enough to feel it. That let's talk about me. There's a self-obsession here. I'm the one that matters, particularly since I'm a victim and I need to justify myself. That my truth matters more than whatever the factual situation is. That I saw this being used by the weatherman on Good Morning Britain against Piers Morgan. It may not be true, but it's her lived experience, whatever this new phrase is. And lived experience, if that's what you think it is, trumps facts.
Yeah. What's an unlived experience? I've often wondered that. I mean, you're absolutely right, and it shines through in everything she says. But it's also clearly the problem that there was with the royal family. Now, I agree with Freddie. I think most Americans don't give a monkeys about our royal family. I'm sure that's right. But it's that individualism. I am now part of this. I think she thought she was signing up to a kind of rather gilded celebritydom, which was a little bit like Hollywood, where she could express herself and put forward her very often inane beliefs about the world with no restraint. And then as soon as she found out that it was different to that there was something involving service and discipline and dignity involved, she scampered off to, as I say, to California, or Canada, as she put it originally. We all knew they weren't going to be staying in Moose Jaw, Canada for very long, and indeed they soon went to Santa Barbara. So I think that's exactly it. It is exactly that woke culture which we have imported largely from the USA, and it devolves always to the individual. And there is no communitarian sense about it. There's no sense about whether it's good for the royal family or not, or whether it's good for Great Britain or not. It's about whether it's good for me or not. And that's the great difficulty. And somehow Harry, who, it's a terrible thing to say, may not necessarily be the brightest lad in the world, has been kind of dragged along with this. And I still kind of cleave to the idea that maybe in a few years' time he will regret what he's done. But certainly it doesn't seem to at the moment.
It's still not clear to me, Freddie, whether she was properly briefed or it was properly explained what being a royal meant, particularly one at that time they were quite pretty senior royals. Indeed, it was meant to be they were to be the Beatles. They were the four. It was Will and Kate, Harry and Meghan. Was she properly briefed, or wasn't she? And even if she was properly briefed, did she just think, I can change this? Because it does seem to me that she didn't understand two things. Being a royal is different from being a celebrity. And you have to behave differently. I mean, when did we last see the Queen jump on a billionaire's private jet? It's just not, or be filmed in conspicuous consumption. It's just not what they do. Plus, you can't really lecture people about global warming or inequality or all the rest of it. That again is, I mean, Charles has got into trouble for straying into some areas, but it's really not what you can do. You cannot have strong opinions, and you can't behave as if you are a Hollywood celebrity. And what I'm not sure is whether that was spelled out to her, or whether she didn't realize it, or it was spelled out, and she said, yeah, but that's yesterday. I can be a celebrity, Hollywood style, and I can have opinions on whatever I want. Silence. Remember, she said she was silenced. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I found it a bit disingenuous when she started talking about how she had no idea. She didn't really. She hadn't even Googled Harry. She didn't really know anything about this family that she was marrying to. I didn't quite believe that, and I also think that it shouldn't really need to be spelled out to you. And I'm sure she was told what the protocol was on various things, and then she just decided that that wasn't for her. I thought it was very interesting that both Meghan and Harry went to such lengths to praise the Queen. And I think that's because they don't understand much, but they do understand the power of brands and sort of global brands. And in some sense, they understand that the reason the Queen is so popular is because she hasn't gassed on about her feelings. She's kept her mental health private. And that's something they're unable to do. And what they can't quite grasp is that they can't be royals in the royal sense, in the traditional sense, and be these celebrities who gas on about their feelings. It's just not sustainable for a monarchy in the British sense.
Was there not, though, Freddie, something a bit disingenuous? You praise the Queen.
Yeah.
We know why they're doing that. Whatever the view of the royal family, the Queen's global image is without parallel. Better than ever, I would say, in all the years she's been on the throne. So you can hardly be seen to trash her. But actually, you praise her, but you trash the institution which she has been head of. I mean, it's nonsense, really, is it not?
Well, I think that's it. I think they probably do. They probably can't admit it. Harry probably can't admit it to himself, but they probably do resent the Queen in some ways, because they seem to resent this institution that they felt trapped by. I think, as I say, I think the reason they praised her, it was disingenuous, was because they know that she's still very popular and they don't want to mess with her brand while they establish their own one.
Well, Rod, Meghan has got her way. She is a celebrity now there, big celebrity. I mean, she was a sort of C-list actress. She's now, if she called a dinner party in Montecito in California tonight, the whole A-list Hollywood would go if they're invited. But she's more than just a celebrity. She's now a cause célèbre. She's got Joe Biden's press officer. She's got Hillary Clinton. She's got Keir Starmer. They're all piling in on her side. Where does it go from here?
Well, I would hope into obscurity, but it doesn't look very much like that at the moment, does it? That's the great problem. And it's something Freddie was saying, and he was saying earlier about the Queen, that actually the reason the Queen has that reputation is simply because she does the precise opposite of what Meghan and Harry do. That is why that brand is strong. And the question we're getting now at the moment over here is what should be done about the royal family. The royal family should try to adapt. We've already got the Queen dressed up as Agatha Christie, going around the various members of the royal family to find out who said the naughty thing about Archie's skin. And there's this feeling that we must somehow modernize the royal family, but you can't. You can't modernize it in the way they want it to be modernized. It's an archaic institution. We could do away with it perfectly reasonably. I can perfectly reasonably see the argument for that. But what you cannot do is have a royal family which is stripped of its regality, of its dignity, and of its aloofness. You can't have that.
Freddie, the Queen clearly hopes that this can now be resolved behind closed doors. She doesn't want to up the ante with a public slanging match, either from the royals or from those who work for the royal family, which would only invite further retaliation from Harry and Meghan. Can she do that? Because it's true. This is what strikes me. You can see why the royal family does not want a public slanging match, much as they would like to reply. They can only have this resolved behind closed doors if Harry and Meghan agree. And of course, they now seem to live off the oxygen of publicity. But this is what makes me think that they might go along with this. Take the most incendiary claim, the conversation apparently about the potential color of the baby. If this is to be resolved in public rather than behind closed doors. First of all, Harry and Meghan will have to get their story straight. They didn't have their story straight with Oprah Winfrey. Meghan Markle began by saying it was they had people who talked to her about it several times while she was pregnant. Then when it got to Harry, it turned out, no, they hadn't talked to her. It was him once before she was pregnant. And they would start to have to name people, give the context of it, give backup, proper interview investigation, which of course the Queen of America did not give. So maybe they will have an interest, Freddie, in just getting this resolved behind closed doors now. They've had their say.
Well, possibly. And I mean, the Queen and the royal family might find some way to bring them back into royal fold. I find that unlikely. I think, I mean, as for the allegations themselves, we might find out that something was said in a relatively innocent way that then got turned into something else. We just don't know. And I find it, again, slightly suspicious that they kept the claims so vague, because if you do want to sort of set this ball rolling, you need to be a bit more specific about what you're saying.
Yeah.
Where do you think it goes from here, Freddie? I mean, I had thought that once they did the big interview and they got things off their chest, that was going to be as good as it gets for them. But well, I don't think that's going to be true anymore. This could be just the start.
I think the royal families had these sort of episodes before. Of course, there was Diana, but there was also Fergie, and I watched an interview this week while trying to write my piece and it was Fergie with Oprah. And the amazing thing was how similar the interview was. If you take the racial stuff out, it was pretty much the same conversation. And so the royal family has to have these sort of periodic psychodramas to sustain interest. But I mean, the reason it always comes back, it always survives, I suppose, is because the Queen has this brand and this sort of perceived dignity. My worry for the royal family, and I'm not that worried because I'm not that much of a monarchist, but it is that once the Queen dies, you're then left with the younger generations who've done nothing but psychodrama and tabloid-style media for decades now. And can the monarchy still be dignified once the Queen's gone? I'm not sure that it can with the crop that's underneath.
Can I just say, I think, Andrew,
Right.
I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. It's not going to stop. And it's not going to stop for a simple mercantile reason, which is that they cannot afford to let it stop. That all of the deals which have been struck between Meghan and Harry and Netflix and Oprah and all of their podcast, and they're apparently also going to be doing a situation comedy, which I thought they'd been doing anyway for the last 2 years. So they're going to do all this stuff, and all of that is predicated upon the fact that he is royal and she is royal, and so they have to be simultaneously associated with the brand, even if it means knocking that brand all the time. They need to keep their names in the limelight as being part of a royal family. So I think it will continue for a long time until everyone gets bored of it, Andrew, I would guess.
I think you may be right. It means, Freddie, finally point to you, that those of us who wish them no ill, but also have really no interest in what they have to say, think of what they have to say is of no importance, and they talk about many things of which they have no qualifications to talk about, and that it would be best if they just faded into obscurity, and then they live a comfortable, privileged life and all the rest of it. That's fine. We don't care about that, but we don't want to have to read them all the time. We're not going to get our way on that, are we, Freddie? Rod's right.
Well, it will become like reality television. If they keep their own productions, if Archwell, their creative production company, keeps going, they'll become a reality TV program. They'll become a kind of like a Kardashians crossed with Made in Chelsea. And that is thrilling for some people, but most of us will find it pretty boring and ghastly.
And the ratings for these kind of programs, in the end, they may peak, but in the end, they always go into decline.
They will, yes. By season 3, it's pretty boring.
Well, while we've been on air, we just see that Prince William has broken silence. This is really quite surprising. Almost it seems as if he's gone against what the Queen would wish. Prince William is being reported by Chris Schiff of ITN. We are very much not a racist family, says Prince William. He broke the royal family silence on the interview. To his brother Harry, he says, I haven't spoken to him yet, but I will do. That's just broken. Let's finish off by getting your reaction to that from both of you. You first, Rod.
I suspect that of all the members of the royal family who sat down to watch that ludicrous non-interview, I rather wish it had been you doing it, Andrew, I have to say, but there we are.
Me too.
I think the two people who undoubtedly hurt the most were William and Kate. And I think my suspicion is that, I mean, I know very little about the royal family's internal workings, but my suspicion is that William and Kate felt particularly strongly and were probably more inclined to say something now than any of the other members of the family, because most of those barbs seemed directed straight at Kate and William. And that's the story which the press has had for the last 4 or 5 years. The question as to how much it matters, you know, I saw an opinion poll, there was one in the Daily Mail, and there was another opinion poll done by YouGov. I think, in a way, this turmoil which has been caused does not remotely reflect the views of the people in the country. The vast majority of people in the country have had enough of Harry and Meghan and rather like the Queen, and that comes out in 2 opinion polls carried out on the same day. I don't think they play at all well in the United Kingdom, and perhaps the royal family ought to be minded not to say too much, just to let them get on with it, because by and large we're all with them.
Freddie, quick final word from you.
Well, it's interesting with William, isn't it? Because although I'm sure it's very difficult, his falling out with his brother and all that, but as far as sort of branding goes, and William and Kate are as interested in branding as Harry and Meghan in their way, they've been rather successful in presenting themselves as the decent, dignified ones compared to the wild Harry and Meghan. I mean, do you remember when they did that slightly ostentatious, or it seemed to be ostentatious, they flew Ryanair and had themselves photographed flying Ryanair just a few days after Harry and Meghan had got in trouble for taking private jets while boring on about climate change. I mean, it is PR wars now, and it's PR wars between a younger generation. I think it's going to get very ugly, and I'm not sure it's very good for the institution of the monarchy.
No, probably not. Gives us something to write about, though, and talk about.
Oh, yeah, we're not complaining.
Freddie, thank you very much for that. We're not leaving the subject, though. We're returning to the politics of it, because there are politics involved in this. And it didn't take long for the royal rift to turn into a political rift with Labour politicians in the UK, Democrats in the United States, from Joe Biden down to Hillary Clinton too, expressing their support for the Duke and particularly the Duchess. And the government here being put in an awkward position of not really being able to say anything, but more right-wing commentators tending to be anti the Duke and the Duchess. James Forsyth is our political editor. Katie Bowles is the deputy. They both join us now. James, there is a political dimension to this, particularly when it comes, I would suggest, to Britain's image in the rest of the world.
Yes, I mean, I think the government are very keen to stay out of this row. Boris Johnson just wants to praise the Queen and sidestep the rest of it. But as you say, Andrew, you know, Britain's international reputation has taken a terrible beating in the past few days. You know, I think, as you and I were discussing, if you watch any of the US morning shows the day after the interview, Britain is being presented as some, you know, backwards country with, you know, all of these kind of prejudiced attitudes. You know, that you've got the butt of a joke on the late night shows, and I think there is a question here, which is, you know, in terms of Britain's international reputation, one of the things that everybody knows about this country, who knows anything about this country, is that it has a monarchy. And there's no doubt that Harry and Meghan, for an international audience, have landed some quite serious blows on that institution. I think this is an odd crisis, in that it's not a constitutional crisis in the way that the Charles and Diana situation was, and could they be divorced or not be divorced? Because Harry is sixth in line to the throne, and he's only going to get further away in that respect. But I do think it has had an impact on the country's international reputation.
Katie, the government is Staatsstürme. That's probably wise for the government to do that. Keir Starmer, though, has kind of showed sympathy for Meghan Markle and seemed to accept a lot of what he was said. On the sheer politics of it, is that wise? This is a Labour leader that needs to win back the red wall. I'm pretty sure the red wall will side more with the Queen than with someone who thinks she's someone of immense privilege who thinks she's also a victim.
Yes, initial polling, I think, is what you would expect, in the sense that it's older voters who are more supportive of the monarchy. We don't have so much more of a breakdown, but it does seem to be that divide between young liberals, some might use the word woke, and then older voters. And as you say, it really depends what Keir Starmer's priority is. I think part of the reason Keir Starmer made the decision to intervene, to say these claims by Meghan Markle must be confronted, come across as very sympathetic to her version of events, what she said, her truth, is because that he was going to face lots of figures in his party calling on him to do just this. So I wonder if in a way it was partly internal work, in the sense that there is a large part of the party that come out and talked about what they see as racist coverage in the press. You're already hearing work by one Labour MP who Prince Harry mentioned in his interview for writing a cross-party letter offering support back when the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were full-time royals, about colonial undertones in the coverage. That Labour MP is now talking about bringing in new press regulation. The first letter, the one Prince Harry mentioned, was signed by many members of the shadow cabinet, all women, including Annalise Dodds. So I think in terms of where the parliamentary party is, where the shadow cabinet is, I think they will be wanting to actually take this position where they are supportive to Meghan Markle, and perhaps looking at things like press regulation, which I think makes some sense of why Keir Starmer chose to make that statement.
James, there is certainly one very serious political implication here. I mean, the Queen has spent most of her life presiding over a hugely successful transformation from empire to Commonwealth, and she's very proud of that. The Commonwealth is, in terms of numbers, overwhelmingly non-white. It's a multiracial organization with a non-white majority. The Queen is the undisputed head of the Commonwealth. But if you've got Meghan Markle with Harry's support and agreement, essentially saying the royal family is racist, that's a big problem for Prince Charles becoming head of the Commonwealth.
Yeah, and it's a particular problem because the head of the Commonwealth is quite deliberately not a hereditary position, to distance itself from that. But it has been, I think, a big object of British diplomacy over the last decade or so to try and ensure that Prince Charles does succeed the Queen as head of the Commonwealth. And I think you're right. I think all of these debates about monarchy in Britain and in the rest of the Commonwealth are essentially frozen while the Queen is on the throne. She is so respected. But what I think Harry and Meghan have done is they have provided Republicans with ammunition for the moment that will follow in the succession. People will start to make the arguments about the monarchy being an outdated institution. I think one of the great, as you said, Andrew, one of the most remarkable things is how the monarchy has managed to the monarchy is no longer, all these debates about Rhodes must fall and imperialism, colonialism, the monarchy has managed to sidestep those and somehow be almost above those debates. And I think the danger is that the way in which Harry and Meghan are talking is that they end up dragging the royal family into those questions.
There's a generational factor at play here, Katie, too, isn't there? And also a domestic international factor. I think I'm right in saying that what Meghan Markle had to say was a lot more popular with younger people than with older people, and that what she had to say was a lot more popular outside the United Kingdom, particularly in America, than it was inside the United Kingdom.
Yes, and I think initial polling is reflecting that, the sense that younger voters are much more sympathetic to the Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's accounts. And again, that goes back to Labour's intervention. You can see that I think it's not a stretch to say that I think young Labour voters are more supportive of Meghan Markle than older Conservative voters. And then I think in terms of how this plays on the world stage, you've had a situation where Boris Johnson does not plan on saying anything more than he has already said. But I think there is a question as to how tenable it is. Robert Buckland, one of his cabinet ministers, criticised Keir Starmer for taking the position he did. But I do think that if we start to see this having negative impacts, not just in terms of whether Prince Charles becomes head of the Commonwealth one day, but also you're hearing reports of various Commonwealth countries unhappy, voicing concern. You have Republicans in Australia making the case of really should we be associated. I wonder if Boris Johnson will have to say something more, because it will start to affect how the country is perceived, and that becomes a political matter.
Indeed, how Britain's reputation is abroad is a matter for the Prime Minister and for the government. Katie, James, while I've got you here, just on some non-Meghan Markle matters, we're now looking at the government on the defensive over a 1% pay rise in the NHS. What's happening here, Katie? The government must surely have known that 1% offer was going to create a huge row. It's almost as bad as no offer at all. Did it just get this wrong, or was it planning to be just an opening offer, and of course the final settlement will be more than that?
Well, it's an interesting one, because when you scratch the surface, it's not quite a blame game amongst ministers, but everyone is very keen to say, oh, well, this head of department said that they were pro-fiscal restraint, and actually, if you take into account the wider economic landscape, there was agreement amongst ministers, including Matt Hancock, Rishi Sunak, that actually to give it a much larger pay rise would be disconnected to the reality in terms of what the private sector are facing, looming mass unemployment potentially, further has extended that slightly. However, I think that when you press, it does not seem to me as though this is definite, and everyone is very keen to say, well, we're not going to get the recommendation from the independent body until May, so nothing is decided. I had one figure say to me, this wouldn't be a U-turn if it wasn't 1%, if it went up, because it isn't actually the policy yet. So you're already getting the sense that people are beginning to realise that this is a politically difficult row potentially. And I think Tory MPs are worried that it could end up being another free school meals row, which had the same sense of bewilderment, which is, why is this the issue the government has decided to go to town on, given if you look at the spending compared to other pieces of spending, and also how politically salient it is. And that's why I think there are two workarounds that MPs, the parliamentary party, are putting to the government. One being, could you target this pay rise? So yes, 1% for some NHS workers, but the lowest NHS workers would get a higher pay rise. And two, could you learn from the devolved administrations such as Scotland and do the 1% pay rise, but also do a one-off pandemic bonus payment to say thanks for your work? And I think those are things to look at.
Why, if it isn't going to be resolved to the summer, why let it become the settled view of the British people that you're only going to get 1%? Why let that hang out there for so long if you already know in the end it ain't going to be 1%?
I don't think they've yet decided it won't be 1%. But look, as you touch on, we've had Boris Johnson come out there and defend the 1%. You've had Matt Hancock defend the 1%. Rishi Sunak's defended it. I think, so they are spending political capital on it. I just think there is this creeping sense, as we've seen with other things they've spent political capital on, such as free school meals, that eventually it'll be ground down. And Labour clearly are very comfortable with this attack line. Keir Starmer had one of his best Prime Minister's questions this week. But I think as for why they're still pushing it, I think that there is generally a sense that they have to bring back fiscal discipline in some way, and therefore the strong message that's come from the Treasury is we need to show that if we spend money on XX, then actually we have to raise money elsewhere and we can't just spend. So I think that's underlining it, but there is this slightly weary sense amongst MPs that we are heading to a deja vu.
All right. Final question for you, James. the salmon sturgeon row continues to rumble on. Nicola Sturgeon still looks pretty well placed for the May Scottish parliamentary elections, but the bloom is off, is it not? The shine is off. The polls are showing that it is beginning to take its toll.
Yeah, and we had a first poll this morning suggesting that the SNP would not win an outright majority at Holyrood in the May elections. We've also had, we had 20-odd polls with independents in the lead. The SNP, it starts to make an argument that, this was becoming the settled will of the Scottish people. Nicola Sturgeon used to kind of enthusiastically tweet about these polls showing the yes side ahead. We've now had we now have a handful of polls showing the union side ahead. Now, I think what is going on here is a mixture of factors. One is the vaccine rollout has kind of, I think, emphasised the benefits of the union. But then I also think that, salmon, sturgeon, and this general air of sleaze that is beginning to emanate around the SNP is, I think, beginning to do them damage. Only 35% of voters think that Nicola Sturgeon has been entirely honest about this affair. And we know that 60% of voters think that she should resign if this investigation by James Hamilton, which we are expecting before the end of this month, says that she broke the ministerial code in her handling of all this.
And indeed, and we've had the SNP chief whip in Westminster standing down, resigning from that position because of allegations against him of a sexual harassment nature too. We'll leave it there. James Akeri, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy.
But we're not leaving the big story of the week, however, big story of the month in many ways, because the most damaging part of Meghan Markle's accusations concerned race, prompting questions over whether the monarchy, the media, British society as a whole, is more racist than it thinks. Were they just the allegations of a victimized snowflake, or are we not as past race and racism as much as we think? I'm joined now by Dr Remi Adekoya. He's an associate lecturer in politics at the University of York, author of Biracial Britain. It's a different way of looking at race. Remi, what did you make of the Duchess of Sussex accusations?
So first of all, thanks for having me. And first of all, I'd say there's two levels of this. There's the small picture aspect and there's the big picture aspect. So the small picture aspect regards who said what specifically and how. And I agree that is definitely interesting because we're talking about the royal family here. But the big picture aspect for me is the issue of colorism, which actually is what is at the background of the claims Meghan Markle made. So essentially what she was saying is there was, worry that the skin color of Archie might be slightly too dark for the British royal family. This might be something which wouldn't look good. And this is a real problem. Colorism is a real thing. While writing my book, Biracial Britain, I spoke to people of mixed race heritage, so people like Archie, essentially very often. And this is something which is discussed in families, and it is often discussed in a context, which implicitly or explicitly suggests that, the lighter skinned the mixed race child is, the better that will be, the better looking that child will be. And these kinds of things are real, and they don't only exist, unfortunately, among white people. Also within African societies, unfortunately, there tends to be that sort of belief that lighter skin, people buy bleaching creams, they tone their skin to look like.
Indian society too has a lot of that, doesn't it?
Sorry, Indian society, you said? Yes. Exactly. Yes. So, so this is a real thing. So I prefer to sort of, for me, I see, Meghan and Harry, irrespective, what kind of personal opinions I might have about them. For me, it's useful when individuals who do have an impact on public discourse raise issues which are relevant and which do affect millions of people. So that is how I approach this.
But it's very interesting. And this issue, this colorism that you say is interesting too. And I'm slightly puzzled in a way by why anybody in the royal family would think this was an issue. I mean, my understanding was that certainly the sensible people in the royal family realized it was a huge asset that someone of a mixed race heritage had finally joined the royal family, because that would allow the royal family to join the 21st century. And that to have at least one face, when they appear in the balcony at our national events or whatever, to have at least one face up there that wasn't pasty white like the rest of them was a huge advantage. And actually, given that Meghan Markle herself is actually pretty light-skinned, it would help if the kid was a little bit more dark-skinned and stand out a bit more. And you could argue that actually the problem is there's only one. There should be more than one.
Yeah, fair. I get the point you're making. Let me tell you how it looks from the perspective, especially of dark-skinned Black people. Yes. So from the perspective of dark-skinned Black people, they have this feeling, and this is also not just, something people invented in their minds. They have this feeling that when white people are ready to accept a kind of Black person, they want it to be as light-skinned as possible, a kind of Black person. And so this is why, and this is a complaint I've heard from many dark-skinned people, this is why very often, on TV, in the media, the kind of Black people you will see on your screens will tend to be mixed-race people or people of a lighter skin color. And so they believe that the way the royal family might have been thinking, and we're of course operating in the sphere of speculation here, and I accept that. But like I said, it's a relevant subject. The way dark-skinned people will interpret this is, so what these people want is to be able to have a child that is, technically not white, slightly exotic looking, but still as white looking as possible, which they can present to the world and then say, oh, look, Britain, we're this diverse place and the royal family is this diverse something. But they wouldn't like to have a child that's darker skin, that looks more like us. This is what the darker skin people would think. That they wouldn't like, that would be too much. That would be too Black. And these are the kinds of feelings that exist among people and which, created that kind of reaction. You talked about here how, the vast majority of the British society doesn't seem to have much sympathy for Harry and Meghan, and polls suggest that clearly. However, if we look at a breakdown of the polls along racial lines, then the same poll, the Daily Mail poll, I think it was, showed that 54% of ethnic minorities in Britain agree with Meghan that she suffered racist abuse from the British press here, while 31% only of white Britons agree with that. So there's a clear divide here, and this comes down to interpretations and perceptions.
Remi, when dark-skinned people of color, when they make the points that you were just going through there, that white society is most comfortable with Black people of lighter skin, or with Asians from the subcontinent with lighter skin too. They're right, are they not? I mean, it is the lighter skins that have made the most progress.
So that's a great point you make, Andrew, and I think that's very helpful that you make that point. That point comes from you. Yes, it is true. And if we study identity, so I've done research on identity, and generally the way identity works across cultures and across skin colors is that people in their heads have a sort of identity spectrum. Now that spectrum starts from me, and then it ends at the opposite of me. And then there's people we position somewhere in between that spectrum of me and the opposite of me. And so those we position closest to us are those who seem most similar to us. And those we position furthest to us are those who seem least similar to us. And so it is perhaps even not strange that white people will look at lighter skinned people and sort of instinctively position us, I say, as a lighter skinned person, closer to them than they would position darker skinned people. There's if we can call them logical, there's some logical, explanations to this with regards to how human identity works. So yes, you are right. This is a fact. And this is an unfair fact, an unfair reality, of course, for the darker skinned people. And so I get where they are coming from when they complain about this kind of things. And sorry to interrupt you, Andrew. Just to further complicate this this discussion, there were discussions within the Black community, and even you find them on Twitter, etc., as to how Black really is Meghan Markle in the first place, and there are people who raise those issues and say, oh, but come on, she's so light-skinned, she's never really experienced real racism, the kind of racism we have experienced as darker-skinned people, So these kinds of discussions are ongoing within the Black community, which doesn't mean that if she's perceived as being under attack by the white establishment, the troops won't rally around her in the sense of, she's still one of us at this particular moment in time.
Are we then because it's hard to know what to do about this. I mean, are we in a process now? I mean, if you look back to Britain of 30, 40 years ago, on what was on television, who our public figures were. It was what, 99% white, maybe more, maybe 99.5% white. And we've made great strides in many ways. You look at television adverts today, they're very multiracial now. Our football players, some television itself, presenters, still a long way to go, nobody denies that. But is it inevitable, or can this be telescoped in some way, that we begin by being most comfortable with people of color who are most like us, and once we get comfortable with that, we'll get more comfortable with people of color of all different hues? Is that inevitable, or can we do something about it?
I think something can be done about it, and I would, to give credit where credit is due, I do think there's definitely been an expansion of the skin shades available in the public realm here in Britain. Okay, so there's more and more you can see darker skinned actors and actresses. I see, at least on my TV screens when watching them. There's still not enough of them, but there's more and more of them, as the years progress. So I think there is a realization, among at least some within the industries that, promote public figures, okay, within media, etc. There is this realization, it's slow to come. And of course, as human beings, we're almost, we're always more comfortable with the people we're more comfortable with. That's a reality. But that doesn't mean we don't fight those instincts within ourselves. We need to, one, acknowledge that, look, I have this kind of bias within myself, even if I don't intend to have it, it's there. So you acknowledge it and then say, okay, how do I fight this? How do I consciously try to, transcend this? As long as that acknowledgement is there and there's a conscious effort to transcend this, that's how we make progress as humanity. That's how we've always made progress.
Just finally, regardless of who's to blame, if anybody's to blame, is it not a matter of great sadness that it's come to this? That here, belatedly in the royal family, a person of color did join it, married a prince, a grandson of the Queen, son of the next heir to the throne. And although it was perhaps a small step in the grand scheme of things, it was a change, it was a difference, it was what it was becoming representative of the kind of society Britain is in the 21st century, and it's all lost. It's ended in acrimony and public dispute. Is that not a cause for sadness?
Oh, definitely it is, because that wasn't a small thing. That was a big thing, because, symbolic things are hugely important. I'm one of those people, who cried the day Obama was elected president in America.
Even because of the symbolism, yeah. I was in America that night.
I'm not American, I've never even been to America. So these things are important. And when she appeared, you see, one thing which has always pained black people is that because of, the history of, slavery, colonialism, etc., a racial hierarchy developed. And that racial hierarchy positioned white people at the top, black people at the bottom, and everyone else somewhere in between. One thing that is common to people who've been assigned the bottom of a racial hierarchy is the denial of prestige. The denial of prestige. And this is something which pains a lot of black people. And this is why when there's an opportunity for prestige, and there's nothing more prestigious than being a member of the royal family in this country. And this is why that meant so much to so many black people. And they were happy about it and proud about it, that, oh, we're going to have a black princess, because that was overcoming that denial of prestige. And then for it to, end the way it ended, that's what's caused so much frustration and anger among so many people.
Remi, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being on Spectator TV. And I hope you'll come back and talk to us, because these issues are not going away. Thank you very much. Now, we've talked a lot on the show about vaccine hesitancy in minority groups, particularly among the BAME group, the ethnic minorities. And it's usually this hesitancy associated with people of color. But the Polish-British journalist Olenka Hamilton has written in The Spectator this week about the reluctance to take the vaccine within the Polish community in Britain. It's a very good article, interesting article. They are actually the second most likely minority in Britain to refuse the vaccine. So why? What explains it among Poles? We're joined by the author of that article, Olenka Hamilton. Welcome to Spectator TV. Explain that. Now, I think you said there are about 900,000 Poles living in the United Kingdom. A big chunk of them are anti-vaxxers, if I can put it that way, hesitant about taking it. Why?
Well, there's a variety of things going on here, but I think mostly it's that Polish people have never really, well, not, you know, in the last 200 years, not really been ruled by benevolent governments. And they just don't believe that we are trying to do them good, basically. It's very, very difficult for a Polish person who's grown up under communism, particularly, and then, you know, under German occupation, and many of them are still alive today, to believe that a government could be trying to help them. And I think this is really deeply ingrained in the Polish psyche. And what really surprises me actually is that my generation of Poles who didn't grow up under those systems are just as skeptical of having the vaccine. It shows actually how what a deep imprint history can have on a nation.
Well, I'm very interested that this almost distrust of government, because for over 200 years, Poles have had very good reason to distrust government, either because it was foreign oppression or it was Soviet communism, which combined oppression with foreign oppression at the same time. I can see that. I was also interested, though, that you said of British Poles, of Poles living either of Polish extraction or Poles born there, but living now in the United Kingdom, that they don't watch much British media, but they do watch a lot of Polish media, which contains quite a lot of the anti-vax memes and propaganda and disinformation.
Well, it's not mainstream Polish media that
No.
is particularly spreading the anti-vax stuff. It's the things that you read on the internet, which could, you know, I suppose you call fake news. That's the sort of stuff that's going round, and this is relating particularly to Poles who have come over more recently and who don't really speak English, and they do live in these sort of, a lot of them live in Polish, let's say, ghettos where they don't really mix with other people, and apart from people of Polish origin, and so they don't hear. They don't hear English language news, and they don't hear the opinions of anyone other than each other, and that's the problem.
Two other quick things. Your article, which was an excellent read, it did surprise me that even Polish health workers are suspicious. Not all of them. I don't mean to say all, but a substantial chunk, if I can put it that way, of Polish health workers, Polish people working in the British health system, are suspicious of the vaccine.
Yes, I lived in Poland for a few years, and I noticed that there's a general sense that vaccines, particularly for fast mutating viruses like flu, are not necessary unless you're very high risk. So I think what Polish doctors have a problem with is vaccinating an entire nation of people, including healthy people. So I think that's the main argument there, I would say.
And of course, the question, what is to be done? We all feel that the more people that are vaccinated, the better, because that will help to make us all safe and get through this terrible thing, which means that we want as many of the Poles living among us to do that too. It probably does need the government to think of an education campaign, does it not?
Yeah, well, there's already one going on. There, various city councils in areas that have a high Polish population are holding sort of seminars and Q&As for Polish people. But I mean, one thing I would say is that the Poles are naturally defiant nation because of what they've been through, but I don't think they're intractable. I think that they are persuadable, and you know, I don't think we should perhaps worry as much as my article might have suggested.
Well, let's hope you're right, and that that a majority do see the need to get vaccinated. But you raise a very important issue in the article, and thank you for writing, and thank you for being on Spectator TV.
Thank you for having me.
Now, finally today, the world is built on commodities. So where did they come from? A new book takes a look at the traders who go into war zones, corrupt regimes. They buy and sell oil, rare earths, grains, all sorts of things. Oftentimes they even shape the geopolitics in the region. Some of the stories could be straight out of John le Carre, but the difference is they're true. And they're reported in a book called The World for Sale. It's by two Bloomberg journalists, Javier Blas and Jack Farshey. And Javier joins me now. Thank you for joining Spectator TV. Rogue traders, it's a fascinating tale that you tell here. But you say that the commodity traders can even be the heart of geopolitical crises, the Arab Spring, the collapse of the Soviet Union, anti-Western coups. Are they really that powerful?
They are looking for business in places that they need commodities. And what happened is that in most of those places, because of the way that they seek the business, they have a political impact. If you look at, for example, Cuba with Fidel Castro, he was short of oil and needed to sell his sugar. And he could not find a way to do it without the help of the commodity traders. So they were very important for sustaining the Cuban Revolution. Or in the case of Libya in 2011, the rebels rose in arms against Muammar Gaddafi, seeking freedom for 42 years of dictatorship. But they were short of gasoline. It was a bit ironic in Libya, an oil producer, but the refineries in the rebel area, they didn't have any access to oil. So they needed someone to supply the oil. And the company that came to the rescue of the rebels was Liddle, an oil trader based in London, who supplied the rebels not only with the gasoline, they extended a credit line of $1 billion to the rebels, which at that point, they didn't have cash or a central bank or any prospect of a government. So that's when the way that they seek business may have a political impact, because commodities and power go together in many countries.
It sounds that although they may be huge capitalists and they may be playing the market economy, that they'll work for anybody.
Oh, absolutely. Matt Rich, which was in a way the godfather of the commodity traders, worked for Pinochet and worked for Fidel Castro and did business with both of them almost simultaneously. They are apolitical. They don't care about a right-wing or a left-wing government. They are used for the money, and they are very happy to help anyone that needs to sell or buy the commodity.
And I was interested too in the book that, bribes have always played a big role in this, given the kind of governments or people that you're dealing with. But at one stage, I think until recently, that if the traders were based in Switzerland, I think Mark Rich was based in Switzerland, for an example, that the bribes were tax deductible.
Andrew, you are absolutely right. And not only they were tax deductible until about yesterday. Switzerland didn't ban the tax deductible of the, as they call it, commissions, because they were not calling it a bribe, they call it a commission. It didn't stop that happening until 2016. And we were researching the book. I was so taken aback by that fact that we kind of double check and triple check. And are we really sure that you could put against your taxes in 2016? It was an astonishing realization. But yes, we quote a trader of the company that became later, the company that was founded by Matt Rich, but later became Glencore. And he told us how very often he came to London Heathrow with £500,000 in cash in his suitcase to pay some, commissions. And then he said, but, they were legal and obviously they were tax deductible at the point.
So he was coming in with a suitcase full of cash, even though when I come into the country, I see signs saying if you've got more than, I think it's £10,000, it's not that you can't bring in more than 10,000, but you have to declare it. You have to tell the authorities, look, I'm bringing in 20,000, not 10. And they may think, well, that's fine, or all right, well, where did you get the money kind of thing. But he just went in and out with a lot more than that.
Yes, and he was coming so often to Heathrow with that kind of money that at some point he got stopped by custom officials in Heathrow Airport. And obviously they asked, well, what do you need this money from? And obviously they will ask him for a receipt on the way back, what did you did with the money? Because as you say, Andrew, you come or I come to Heathrow with that kind of money, I'm gonna face some questions. So obviously he was not going to get a receipt for the use that he was going to give to the money. So he told the custom official, I go gambling. And then he said, I said that I lost the money.
And they bought that?
Apparently so, yes. We told to him he's a free man in Switzerland.
Well, I must remember that. The only problem is I don't gamble, but I'll remember it nevertheless. You mentioned Glencore there, and there's a fascinating case, very contemporary now, the pandemic is beginning to spread, which will inevitably have a downward effect on the price of oil. Glencore does two things. It first of all buys up all the storage space it can find, including tankers floating in the sea. And then when oil gets really down, it goes in and buys up that oil and stores it. And then at a profit, I think you said, of over $1 billion, 1.3 billion, it then, as the price rises again, it sells that oil. Now, I looked at that and I thought, it's quite clever in a way. I'm sure they do that all the time. But was there anything wrong with that, or is that just oiling the wheels of global commerce?
The traders are very important for global commerce, and actually we do need them. We need the traders to play this business function of linking the producers and the suppliers. And for that, they should be rewarded because they are risking their capital and they are providing a service to the global economy. But yes, they were very clever. They saw earlier than everyone else that oil demand was about to collapse because of the pandemic. We were starting to go into lockdown. So they bought the oil, they stored it, and they sold it 6 months later, making a big profit. In many ways, you could argue that that was a good thing, because if no one had stored that oil, the oil industry will have suffered more. They will have to shut down more oil fields, lay off more people, and probably now we will have a problem that there was not enough oil to go around. So for that service, they helped the oil industry, probably they helped the global economy, but obviously they helped themselves very nicely with more than $1 billion in profits.
They certainly did. Are the glory days of the kind of traders you write about, are they over, or are they always going to be with us?
We're going to need commodity traders for as long as we need natural resources. At the end of the day, I have a coffee this morning, probably was coming from Central America, and I'm not going to be the one who is going to be collecting those coffee beans in a port in Costa Rica and bring it here home into the United Kingdom. So we will need them, but the glory days of everything is possible, you could deal with any government that you want, and often you are coming to Heathrow with £500,000 in cash to bribe someone. That's over. We have authorities, the UK Serious Fraud Office, the US Department of Justice investigating now some of the big traders. And also the world has changed. In the past, a trader will have better information about the market than anyone else. Today, that information is more democratic and the internet has spread. I find fascinating on my traveling covering the natural resources industry, going somewhere in, say, Ivory Coast and go to a small village and someone has a smartphone, and with that smartphone, they know the price of cocoa in the London market on that day. 20 years ago, that was not possible. So one of the advantages of the traders, which was access to information, that is being eroded. But we are going to need the traders, and they're going to still be around for years, probably decades.
Well, it's a fascinating book. It's well reviewed in The Spectator this week. I think you've got it strategically. You're clearly a book trader. You've got it strategically placed behind you, which is very good. People can see it. It's called The World for Sale. It's a great read. It's about very important topics, and it's well worth your time. Javier Blas, thank you for joining us on Spectator TV. Good luck with the book too. And that's it for this week. Thanks to all of our guests. Once again, to our very special sponsor, Charles Stanley. They sponsor the Week in 60 Minutes. Charles Stanley, one of the UK's leading wealth management firms, one of the oldest firms on the London Stock Exchange. As always, please send us any thoughts you have on Spectator TV to SpectatorTV at spectator.co.uk. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.